But you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. All right, thanks for watching last night. If you guys tuned in to the live election coverage and results, the results were on People's Pundit Daily Live. If you want to check them out, we're going to see them today. Link is in the description from the video yesterday. But yeah, good times. It wasn't until 3 o'clock in the morning, which I very much appreciate for the state of Wisconsin. But a lot of bad takes today, and we're just going to make it very easy for everybody to figure out because we're going to spend a couple of minutes on the open on Wisconsin. We're going to show you some illustrations. They always help people understand things that are convoluted. And then we'll have Liz Harrington, spokesperson for Donald Trump, come on and react to the indictment. We'll have Daniel Street back on to provide legal analysis. Mike Davis is going to join us later in the week. Big week, big week. All right, so here's what happened. So very clearly, and let me make it bigger. That's a little small for you, right? The Democratic candidate, the liberal, right? Janet Protasiewicz, I was butchering her name all last night, defeated conservative Dan Kelly and defeated him pretty badly. All right. So far, a little over 11 points. All right. So as usual, loser thing comes out and blames Donald Trump. He's damned. The guy's damned if he does. He's damned if he doesn't. All right. He goes out and he helps these candidates. And if they don't do as well, then he's blamed for them. Okay. Then bottom line is, he doesn't, and he's still blamed for them. It doesn't really matter. Look, the man is facing an indictment. All right. Running around the country, helping people who don't want his help is not his best way of spending time. And that's the truth that you haven't heard. The truth is Dan Kelly did not want Donald Trump in the race. His consultants did not want him anywhere near this race. It was all over the Washington Post, all over the New York Times. For some reason, though, Fox News and company doesn't want to tell you about that today. They wanted Trump to stay distant from this race. And I'm going to show you right now in plain English why that was a really, really bad idea. Wisconsin is simply the latest example of the Republican Party not being able to drive out enough voters to win elections in competitive states without Donald Trump on the ballot. Folks, a lot of people just don't want to, and I'm keeping this up for a reason, but a lot of people they simply don't want to acknowledge that before Donald Trump, the Republican Party was a failed national party. They hadn't won a national election since George W. Bush. And even that was not really a solid election. It required the Ross Perot kind of attitudinal coalition to stay on board. These are voters attitudinally that the Republican Party lost after Ronald Reagan. And they didn't stay on board after George W. Bush the first time around because they became the party that they are now. We're going to make this real clear for you. Donald Trump is the first Republican presidential candidate to win the state of Wisconsin since 1984. People forgot what that means, how significant that is. Here is Ronald Reagan. Keep that map in your head. Keep that map in your head, okay? Here is Ronald Reagan. And here is so bottom line, the 1984 election and the 1992 election. The 1998 election. 88, God. 84 versus 88. George Herbert Walker Bush won 88, and he won it with over 400 electoral votes, but he lost the state of Wisconsin. Keep that picture in your mind mentally as we go through this, and we'll go back and forth from it quite a bit. Here is Reagan, 1984. That is Dukakis beating George Herbert Walker Bush in 1988. Please focus on the map. Let's one more time look at Kelly's map. It's not as bad as Dukakis versus Bush, but it's still pretty bad. Let's look at it again. Very similar when you're looking at the ethnic demographics that Barnes and I have gone over and over and over. The darker the color, obviously, it's the larger the margin. You may notice how well Reagan did in in Bayfield, Ashland, and Douglas. Very, very well for a Republican candidate. You may notice that Bush did worse there. And you may also notice that he lost a lot of other counties that Reagan carried in the Northwest, including Rusk, Polk. Look at Sauk, for instance, which is a key bellwether. Look how light Juneau County is. Again, Kelly, Bush, Romney versus Trump. Is anybody seeing a pattern here? This is so easy to spot. You don't have to be some data guru or some genius. You don't have to be. Even when Trump loses. By the way, actually, let's not bring up Trump just yet. Here's Ron Johnson. All right, let's bring up Ron Johnson. Keep the picture of 2016 in your mind right now. Okay? Here's Ron Johnson. Come on, load up, Ron. And actually, let me make it bigger for you guys. Ron Johnson. Look familiar? Again, Trump. 2012 is Romney. Looking quite a bit like Dukakis. Looking quite a bit like Mr. Kelly. Keep your eye on 2016. Now let's look at Ron Johnson's win. Oh my God! The 2020 map we could go over, but the bottom line is it's the same as this one with the small difference of Dorr, which is always separated by like 50, 40 votes, being for Biden by like no joke 40 votes, which is that tiny little county in the peninsula right there. It's not, but every vote matters in a race this close. You may notice how well Ron Johnson did against Mandela Barnes in what Barnes and I have called lumberjack country, the birthplace of progressive labor. 44%, 44%, 44%, 45%. That is Trump numbers. Even when Trump lost, he still did. Ashland, 44%. Bayfield, 43%. Douglas, 44%. What did Dan Kelly do there last night? Let's go back and look. Looks a lot like Mitt Romney did. Let's go back to the map. 37%, 36%, 38%, 39%. That's frankly even better than Romney, who lost the state overall by 6, because Romney still did a little bit better in what everyone's talking about today. Waukesha, Dan Kelly only carried Waukesha by 3. All right. Trump carried Waukesha both times. And yes, that has been trending away from Republicans and has been trending away from them for quite a while. The difference is Trump wins these other areas. And by the way, Trump won Waukesha by 21 points. 21 points. Again, there's Dan Kelly, there's Mitt Romney, there's Dan Kelly, there's Mitt Romney, there's Dan Kelly, there's Mitt Romney. Looks a lot different, doesn't it? And look, by the way, how similar Trump's map is, because the 2016 map is the 2020 map minus 40 vote margin or something in Dorr. It's less than 100 votes, something like that. That is the, and look at how close it is to Reagan. Why? It's the same reason Republicans can't carry Macomb County, Michigan. Attitudinally, these voters are Reagan-like, Trump-like attitudinal kind of voters. They are populist. I hate to break everybody's bubble who thinks they rode the Reagan coattail for the 80s and the 90s, but Reagan was more of a populist than people want to give him credit for, and he was much more, honestly, I think, more of a populist than he was really a conservative. It's not conservative to give away a gun, give away the Second Amendment. It's not conservative to think that Democrats are going to keep their promise on immigration. It's not conservative to lose on the Department of Education, and on and on and on and on. It's not conservative to renege on some of your tax cuts and take some of them away. Did Trump? Nope. There's a lot of myth around Ronald Reagan. One is that he was a neocon. He wasn't exactly a realist either, but he was surrounded by neocons. And because he had a foreign policy of ABC, anything but communism, it led them into stupid things like the Iran-Contra scandal and arming rebels that may be anti-communist but are murderers. And as long as they kill communists, you look the other way while they deal drugs with the CIA. But the bottom line is he was not an interventionist. And neither was Trump. And that's why you see these ethnic Norwegians, ethnic Scandinavian counties, lumberjack country. And while Rona made some good points, for her to go on there and say we lost ground in Waukesha and Outagamie and Brown County because of abortion, you are totally missing the mark. Abortion most definitely drove up Democratic vote in some of these areas, and without a doubt, that helped fuel Democratic turnout in the race last night and before, by the way. But I would argue that it really wouldn't matter if Republicans were a national party who was able to excite people to the polls. They're not. And you take Donald Trump out of the equation and they are a loser party. They have been losers for 20 years. He gave them a temporary reprieve from getting their you-know-what's kicked. It is not insignificant that he is the first man to carry this state since 1984. Again, let's do it again. Romney, Trump, Reagan, Bush, Romney, Trump, Reagan, Bush, Dan Kelly. It's so obvious it hurts to honestly say this over and over and over again. It shouldn't matter who you support or who you don't support. Republicans have a turnout problem. Without Donald Trump, they don't turn anyone out. They had 6 years to earn the trust of these voters, and they fought, they mocked, they belittled, and worst of all, they abandoned. That's the worst thing you can do to a voter. Break a 7-year campaign promise. Abandon them when they're being thrown in jail. 2 elected Republicans showed up yesterday. 2. And you expect them to show up for you? It's hard to explain to people how a voter could vote for Obama and then Trump, maybe once or twice, even vote for Obama, then Trump, then for Biden, and now be back to Donald Trump in the polling. It's hard to explain that to partisans who are in this game day in and day out. And I'll be real honest with you folks, I didn't even understand it for a long, long time until 2015 and 16. I didn't get it. I didn't believe. Larry Schweikert, if he was on the show right now, would tell you I didn't even believe my own polling in Wisconsin. My final poll in Wisconsin, Trump +1, I didn't believe it. I thought that people were hoodwinking me or something. You really have to listen to them almost on a daily basis and talk to them almost on a daily basis to realize who these people are. You know them in your life. You see them every day. You probably have a bunch in your family. They don't view a vote for a Democrat as a vote to destroy the Republic. They see the Republic as going anyway. And it doesn't really matter whether or not they vote for the Republicans or the Democrats. They're going to, in the end, vote for who they think, if they're both crappy, who they think may make their personal life better or may stay out of an element of their personal life. They don't view it like it's this critical vote and Democrats are out to kill the country. So partisan Republicans just can't figure this out. We will continue to measure the Trump or bust vote. And we will continue to measure the Trump or third party, other party vote, because this is significant. In the last poll that we released, it was the first time we had ever done that. The first time any pollster had ever done that. Again, one more time. Reagan, Bush, Romney, Trump. Reagan, Bush, Romney, Trump. Dan Kelly. This is so obvious, it's ridiculous. Blaming Trump is loser think. Loser think, which is what the Republican Party was dominated before Donald Trump. This is not like a partisan statement. This is historical fact. They barely won re-election in 2004. It was a few thousand votes in the state of Iowa, which that man carried by almost 10 points. George W. Bush barely won re-election. Barely. They've been a party of losers for a long time. Because this voter attitudinally that we are talking about abandoned them after Reagan. Yes, generations past and long gone, but that's why it's more than a demographic. It's an attitude. That person cares about me. That person keeps their campaign promise. That person defends me. That person looks out for me. They gave Bush one chance, and voters in Wisconsin didn't even. They went for Dukakis. And Bush was a fraud, so they bounced. And that's it. This is visually the best I can do for you. If you can't look at that map and see, then you're blinded by something. I don't know what it is. Let's bring on our guest. As always, thank you, Liz, for joining the program. Spokesperson for Donald Trump, Liz Harrington, everyone. Thanks for joining Inside the Night.
Hey, Rich. Thanks for having me.
I don't know if you were listening to that, but like this is so like a simpleton could see this. This is so easy and obvious. You have all the typical losers out this morning blaming the former president. He didn't do enough for Dan Kelly. When there were headlines in the Washington Post, there were headlines in the New York Times. They didn't want, they didn't really want his help. Number one, according to those reports. Number two, win on your own, losers. Win on your own.
Well, these are the same people who said, President Trump hurt our candidates in 2022, even though he went something like, 290 to 22 or something was their ultimate record. It's just absurd. So then this candidate literally says that he doesn't want President Trump's endorsement. Okay. See how that works out for you. But Rich, you've been explaining this for a very long time, just looking at the numbers. And it's very obvious that President Trump, he is the only candidate, MAGA, America First, that style, who brings in more people to the Republican Party. I mean, you're talking about a ceiling, really. Everything they said about him in 2015, 2016, he's got a ceiling of a vote. That's actually true for the establishment candidates. That's true for the run-of-the-mill regular Republican. It's not true for Donald J. Trump. In fact, it keeps increasing. He keeps bringing in disaffected Democrats, independents, minority voters, working class people. I mean, a huge chunks of the population, he keeps adding those voters in. And it's clear why. Because he is populist. He's common sense, and he fights for America, and he fights for the issues that regular people actually care about. And him being under such threat and such attack unjustly is only bringing more people into that fold, because Americans, they want justice. They know when something's not fair. And we are a country of fairness, and everything that's been going on lately has been an attack on our country, an attack on our constitutional rights. And the American people see it as an injustice, and they say, no, we can't have this. And they're rallying to his side.
His coalition it's just mathematically true. His coalition has always given more to the GOP than the GOP has given to him. That's why Ron Johnson survived in 2022, by the way, because he got branded with Trump from his race in 2016, and Johnson stayed true to that folksy Wisconsin, anti-Pfizer, anti-whatever it may be, anti-lockdown, anti-deep state. He stayed true to that. So if you go and look at Johnson's map, it's identical, Liz. You can overlay it with Trump's map. You can overlay it with Reagan's map. And then you take everyone else and put them on the separate category and look at them. And it's very clear that they don't get that vote. So Johnson is getting Obama voters now because of that. He basically benefited from Trump being the nominee in 2016 and again in 2020. Yet, I got to say this, because this is something that I hear a lot about and I understand. Yet two elected Republicans show up to support him yesterday. Now, look, he didn't ask anybody to come and support him, not elected people, but at least not publicly. But everything he does, and two people, George Santos and Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's it. And then you expect his vote to come out and vote for you? I mean, Liz, you got to be kidding me. I got to ask you. I don't mean to put you on the spot with it, but I got to ask you. Two people, that's it. It's a disgrace.
Well, they need to listen to what their voters are telling them. I mean, that's the biggest problem. And that's been this disconnect of the establishment, the corrupt ruling class that really wants nothing to do with the average American. They don't even want your vote. They don't care.
That's right.
They don't even think they need your vote. It's so corrupt. And I think you bring out something interesting, but he does have the people on his side, and that's what he cares about the most. But if you saw his truth post this morning, I mean, now's the time. Where are the Republicans? We need to defund the FBI and the DOJ. Enough of this. If there's no accountability, when they're sending the number 3 at the DOJ inside the Manhattan's DA office to resurrect this bogus fake case against just the former president, the number 1 political opponent, the number 1 leader in all the polls, presidential candidate, to bring these sham charges, that's collusion for you. Why aren't they investigating that? Why aren't they hauling these people before Congress? Why aren't they shutting off the funding? Because that's the only thing they'll respond to. They do not care. They haven't had any accountability. And they're getting worse, and they're going after the average American. They are not just going after President Trump. Clearly, it's so much bigger than him. And he's the only one that's going to do anything about it. So we need Republicans. Start legislating, start doing your job, what people put you in there to do. And it really ties into what you're talking about, Rich. And people, why they supported Ron Johnson is because he did follow through on things. He acts on investigations and different things that he said he was going to do. He tries to hold people to account. He's tried to hold Big Pharma to account. So people reward you when you follow through on your campaign promises. That's why they love President Trump, because they know he's the real deal. He actually believes what he says. And more importantly, he acts on it. It's time for the rest of the party to start acting, or we won't have a country left. Take action now, or all of our freedoms are at stake.
Yeah, since, by the way, speaking of Republicans losing elections, the last Republican or at least, big name Republican to come out and call for the defunding of the DOJ or the FBI or any agency within justice was back in the 90s, Liz, after Waco and Ruby Ridge. And they were seriously on the chopping block back then, or at least, a big part of their budget was. And that was just consequently, the last time they actually had a major victory without Donald Trump on the ballot, or at least, post 9/11, I guess you could give it that, but that's extreme, those are extreme circumstances. But yeah, no one else is going to call for that. That's not going to happen. If they did, it would be so disingenuous. But I really do think that, at the end of the day, from just hearing voters, I don't know if you saw it, it just came out. The Rasmussen poll shows Trump with a 7-point lead, which is what we had him over Biden with likely voters. Registered voters was a little bit smaller, but the demographics were the same, Liz, which is even the underclass now, which is a Democratic vote, is now going to Trump and no other Republican nominee, by the way, or potential nominee. The only income group that Joe Biden is winning is the rich.
Yeah. Yeah, they're the party now. It's really the establishment in both parties, but they they only appeal to the ultra rich, people that have already, benefited from this corrupt system and want to close the door behind them. I mean, that's really who they're appealing to. That's it. And President Trump breaks through all that. And, one of the big reasons I think why is because they look at President Trump and they've seen success. They've seen success in his life, living the American dream. They've seen, obviously, the attacks and all the injustice and everything else, but they want the country to be successful again. And it was. We had peace and prosperity under President Trump's historic first term. And that's what they want again. I mean, they want that for themselves. They want that for their family. They want their children to have a future. I mean, right now, all of that's in doubt. And when he talked about it in the speech last night, these issues that are facing the country now, I mean, the idea of the dollar losing its status as the world reserve currency, that is catastrophic. And that will destroy our economy more than it's, there will be a point of no return for this country. And that's on the table now because of what this corrupt ruling class is doing, pushing our enemies together, like China and Russia, pushing Saudi Arabia away from us, all these different things, cutting off our energy independence. All of these issues affect people in their daily life. And they see it and they know who's speaking the truth. They know who actually addressed these issues. They weren't just all talk. It wasn't promises of, energy independence. I mean, President Trump is the only one that made that a reality, and he did it very quickly. I mean, it just shows you how blessed we are in this country, and yet the corrupt ruling class has prevented us from having this great wealth. They've been getting it and keeping it all to themselves. I mean, it's just so destructive what they've been doing. And the American people really see it. They know fundamentally something has gone way wrong in this country. And we have to get it back, and we have to get it back soon, or we won't have a country left.
Yeah, you're a step ahead of me again. That's what I was going to ask you, because I really do think, with the focus on the indictment and the polling change, pre-indictment, post-indictment, the truth is this actually had been going on. This shift, now it's a surge, but the change in the polls had been happening before this, and I attributed it really to a little bit of vetting, about the other candidates, and a little and the fact that the president was focused on messaging. And this is a perfect example. So last night he said, "We are now a failing nation. We're a nation in decline. Now these radical left lunatics want to interfere with elections using law enforcement." And I think just like 3 sentences right there, he wraps up what I think is going to determine how a Republican voter votes. So is somebody going to be talking about what really is at stake? It's not a normal election, Liz, in the minds of these voters. They're not thinking, okay, it's about the economy, who has better economic policy, but he is focused on policy, all with this idea, with this overarching message. So I think that started to send out the polls back, in his direction even more. But now he just took off, So from your point of view, I think Van Jones tipped their hand last night. He said, "This indictment's skinny. It's nothing. Let's hope Georgia has something more firm, because election interference really resonates more with people." I mean, it's very obvious what they intend to do. I want to get your thoughts on that, whether you think, this is going to further backfire on them or what.
Yeah, I mean, I think it obviously will backfire, but these are people that do not care. I mean, they're communists.
No.
I mean, These are people that are just hell-bent. It's about their own survival, because they know, I mean, President Trump said it, it's either the deep state destroys this country or we destroy the deep state. That's pretty much it. That's where we're at in this country now. And they're desperate. I mean, they got to try to take out President Trump before the primaries. I mean, why are they're bringing sham charges and then going to try to have the trial start on January 2024? They are obviously trying to meddle in not just the general election, but the primaries. And clearly they have hauled probably every single member of our campaign before a grand jury in DC over these bogus investigations that President Trump had every right under the Presidential Records Act, under the Constitution. Everything he's done has been totally above board. They illegally raided his home, and now they're just on a completely disgusting witch hunt, taxpayer funded, by the way, actual election interference. But of course, they're not going to stop. They're going to try to do whatever they can. If they can do it with Alvin Bragg in the most pathetic, what a coward, by the way. He can't
Ran
even
right
answer
off that stage.
questions. He can't even sell you what you're actually accused of. It doesn't list the crime. I mean, it is insanity. And like President Trump said, I never thought this would happen in America, but here we are. And that's what we're facing. And so clearly, I mean, he's not deterred. He's more resolute. He's stronger. And this is the most courageous man in our country. He's got so much support behind him, and it's growing. But I mean, he's very clear-eyed about what we're facing here. And that's why he sacrificed so much to continue this fight. And he didn't have to do this. And if he quit today, all of this would go away. But he can't do that because he loves America. And that's what's at stake. Our country is at stake. So yes, they're going to continue. They're going to harass us. They're going to interfere in the election. They have no choice. But he has no choice. He is going to lead this movement. We're going to save America, because if we don't, I mean, everybody, the whole thing is gone, and we will be a complete communist country, and we can't let that happen.
You know, you said he didn't think this could happen. We're hearing that from a lot of these voters, especially they're the older voters who were saying, you know, well, look at the other candidates. I don't know. I'm a little soft support. I really don't think they believe that would happen. You know, I really don't think. And now that it did, you know, it's not just us, it's everybody. Every single poll is showing that those voters, seniors who grew up in a different time, you know, and I don't think they ever thought that, you know, that this could happen in this country, you know, but you got to give it to people like President Obrador, Viktor Orban, the president of Hungary, the president of Venezuela. At least they're speaking up, Liz. And they're like, look, this is a political persecution.
Sad.
It
How
is
sad is that we have these countries saying this about the United States? I think that's the saddest thing of this whole thing, that we do not have our status. And you know, President Trump brought it up in the speech last night too. You know, what they did in Afghanistan. I mean, after 20 years, and then to end the war that way in such a humiliating fashion, deliberately so, giving Bagram to China, taking the military out first, killing our brave men and women in the process. I mean, that was kind of a line that was crossed as well. And it's just, since that point, has just accelerated and accelerated. And we are becoming a total laughingstock. We can't talk about democracy, right, anymore. It's a joke. Our elections are a joke.
As the Venezuelan president said, he said, I never want to see a press release again from the U.S. State Department,
exactly.
You know, saying, you know, lecturing anybody on free and fair elections, on political persecutions, on democracy. You know, so we lose that moral might, you know, which is what's been holding this together for a long time.
It really, exactly.
That
is exactly right, Rich. And that is what it is. We have these, you know, frankly, evil people who have no moral code. They do not care. And it's having a real effect. We've lost that moral high ground. And that has been holding us up. And the founders said that, you know, this isn't going to work unless you have moral, you know, men and women running it. It's just not going to work. And there's a great quote from Benjamin Franklin, you know, if this is, you know, the wickedness of the people, you know, with the government, I hate to see it without it, you know, it's just crazy. I mean, people are inherently corrupt, you know, it's
right.
But you need its moral underpinnings, this footing to hold it all together. Otherwise it doesn't. And you see what happens. The rule of law out the window, doesn't mean anything now. The Constitution, I mean, again, Sixth Amendment, you can't charge someone, arrest someone, and not tell them what they're charged with. But they've been violating these standards of common law for so long now. They did it to President Trump in the first sham impeachment. He wasn't allowed to face his accuser. I mean, that is so wrong. And they hide behind, oh, he's a whistleblower. No, he's a deep state hack that works for Joe Biden on Ukraine issues. I mean, where all the corruption was. I mean, it's unbelievable how corrupt this is. But again, yeah, none of it is going to work if you don't have that morality injected into it. And sadly, that's where we are. And we've lost the moral high ground as a country. And we got to get it back. And President Trump will bring it back. I mean, he believes in the rule of law and equal justice and the American dream. That's why he's running. I mean, that's why he's done everything he's done. He didn't have to do it.
Yeah, and he won't be the first. He won't be the last. I mean, this has been going on a while. Kavanaugh, they did not give him due process. Nancy Pelosi comes out after the indictment wasn't even unsealed yet, but she says, he's been charged. He'll have a chance to prove his innocence. That's not how it works, Nancy. But what should we be surprised, Liz? That's what she said. That's what Schumer said when they were, accusing then Judge Kavanaugh of being a serial gang rapist. I mean, and as far as communists and tactics, they just elected a communist in Chicago yesterday.
Unbelievable.
It's not like hyperbolic, Liz.
Exactly. And it is not. And that's why President Trump says, they've skipped over socialism. The train just kept moving past that station. It's communism. And I mean, you have the major city that is just, more dangerous than Afghanistan. I mean, it's absolutely appalling that it's so sad that this is in the United States. We have these third world cities, and it's not just Chicago. Look at what they're doing in New York, LA, all these different places. But I mean, the idea that a communist then wins, I mean, I don't know if these elections are free and fair or not, but if that election is free and fair, we have a bigger problem, I think, than election integrity or anything. I mean, if people are actually voting the communist in, where are we as a nation? I mean, we really need to turn things around.
Now, sadly, I think they probably are. De Blasio, and I'm not
he's
like
a communist
New York.
too.
Yeah, and I used to be, I used to be so proud to be from not just New York State, but from New York City, and now my entire family has fled there. The last remaining survivor, we used to call him, he's gone. He left, and the place is a dump. It's no longer the bastion it used to be. It was like the best city in the world, and now it's not only a dump, but now it's the very first one to pull the trigger on a Stalinist persecution like this. And it's not only am I not proud anymore, I feel like a level of disgrace, that I'm even have any attachment to. It's been years. But still, you never get rid of the accent. You never get rid of the attitude. And a little part of you never gets rid of the love that you have for the Big Apple. Still some part of me misses it, even though it's gone. That Big Apple is long gone. I still miss what it was. And it's a travesty, Liz. It is.
It is a travesty. And but one final point, that's why they're bringing these sham charges in places like that they have full control over, where he can't get a fair trial, where they're trying to rig the system. But I mean, ultimately, the truth and the law are on our side. So he's going to fight and he's going to win.
Thanks for joining us as always. Thanks for joining us as always, Liz.
Always good to see you.
Can't wait to have you back. All the best.
Thanks so much.
Liz Harrington, everybody, spokesperson for Donald Trump. Look, we're laughing about a lot of this stuff, but there was literally a communist elected in Chicago yesterday, literally. So when Cernovich is on, his Substack saying, unless you understand that this is very different, than anything we've ever seen in the past, this is a Stalinist tactic, Stalinist approach, then you're not really ready to be elected to office. And there you have it. I mean, speaking of the law, I can't wait to have him back on. I'm sorry to keep him waiting, but folks, we got Daniel Street back on, author and legal analyst. Daniel Street, folks. One thing, Daniel, before we even get started, before we even go into this and the law and what you read and saw about this indictment, if you haven't read Daniel's books about fake news, only a lawyer could do it like this. He prosecutes the case against the media. You will have forgotten about some of these fake news headlines. They're amazing. They're well written. There's a lot of these books out there, Daniel, but yours are phenomenal. They're the best, hands down, hands down. So, but thanks for joining us again.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and thanks for the with a resounding endorsement of my books. You can see they're
It's
kind
the
of
truth.
strategically over my shoulder, the other shoulder here. You can see the covers. You know, Rich, it's always a pleasure to be with you. I have to say though, these are dark times and
Yeah.
really unfortunate circumstances to join you to talk about what's going on in New York.
Was this worse than you, now that the indictment's out, Daniel, was this worse than you thought? I was wondering if, this can't be what we're all hearing. It can't be this legal theory that every Fed rejected. And, you're the lawyer, but it has to be something else. To see him run off the stage like that during the press conference when, these were layups. These were softball questions. Can you please, great speech, can you please point to the spot in the indictment that backs up anything you just said? And this is liberal media in a very blue, hard left area, and he doesn't owe the country an explanation. Before we even get into that, your thoughts overall about the indictment. Am I wrong here? Is this like worst case scenario? Meaning there's nothing. They really just did this.
Yeah, there's nothing to it. And look, it's worse in a sense from what I anticipated but the primary reason it's worse is the manner in which they have accumulated the charges. I didn't anticipate that they would take multiple different little entries pertaining to the same data and try to conjure up separate charges for each of those. So, yeah, it's worse. But it is the legal theories underpinning the charges are exactly what we thought and exactly what we expected.
So nothing.
Yeah. And Rich, and I don't know how you wanted to go at talking about the topic, but I got some bullet points I put together of why this probably isn't going very far.
Yes, please.
And I've watched a lot of people interviewed in the last 24 hours about this, and very few people deal with these particular issues. First of all, there's actually not a crime stated in the indictment. There are conclusory statements that crimes were committed. That there was a violation of the falsifying records statute by this notation on this date, but they don't say why. And nothing about the underlying crime. The other fundamental problem they have is that this New York Penal Code requires that there be an intent to defraud. Okay. And that is interpreted by the case law to be, and I'm going to quote this, to quote, cheat someone out of money, other property, or something of value, close quote. That's what the New York state case law says they have to prove. They haven't even alleged it. Not only they not allege it, their statement of facts that accompanied the indictment don't even come close to claiming that happened to anybody. So I think there's a very good likelihood that the indictment will be found to be insufficient in that basis, because they simply haven't defrauded anyone, didn't attempt to defraud anyone, as that is defined for purposes of New York law. Do
you have any, and I don't want to go down the bullet points, I do, but just on that note, do you have any, because the last time you came on, you said, and believe me, it went nuts. A lot of people agreed with you 100%, that this is only going to stop when the Republicans turn the tables and start doing it on them. Meaning Democrats, when they start. I've not seen that yet. Obviously, you got a lot of bold statements from congressmen, but they're still literally on vacation right now. And, Steve Bannon had to remind me it wasn't until Friday that the Lord and Savior was arrested. Thursday, technically. It was Thursday. But, they could have come back, and called a special session before the holiday or done something. Believe me, if the roles were reversed, Adam Schiff would have hauled everybody back to deal with this. But are you concerned at all? I think, the guest we had on with you last time, Mike Davis, did a really good job showing this link between the Biden White House and Alvin Bragg's Justice Department. And now the judge, who I do know this name, is a Trump hater and raised a Trump hater. So are you concerned about this? And obviously they'd have to appeal this, right? If this judge just turns out to be a total hack.
Yeah. Well, first of all, with respect to the need to kind of reciprocate quid pro quo and Republican attorneys general and district attorneys in what, responding in kind. And what I meant is look what all of these investigations are with respect to Donald Trump and Republicans is they are investigations in search of a crime, not investigations into criminal activity. And so what I've suggested, and I think what Mike Davis has suggested, and a lot of other people, is that Republicans need to do that same thing. And I'm not talking about going after city council members in some little town somewhere. We're talking about the big shots, because that's what's going to stop this from happening. The Democrats have done it for a while. You remember they indicted Rick Perry, governor of Texas, if you remember that.
Bob McDonnell.
Tom DeLay, who was Speaker of the House. Ranking member when he was in the House. And so this is been going on for a while. Now it's on steroids in the Trump era, obviously. And so am I concerned that Republicans won't reciprocate? Sure. I think if the GOP has done anything, they've established that they don't have the moxie in most instances. There's some exceptions to play hardball, and I think that it's imperative that Republicans reciprocate. And there will probably be some people who do, but the other thing to think about is if somebody decided to do that now, it's going to take time. Congress could come in like you described and say, hey, we're going to set a special committee up. We're going to call.
They can move.
They can move quick, and they should, and they probably will. But I think the jury's out on whether we're going to see any, no pun intended, as to whether we're going to see any Republican attorneys general or district attorneys do what the Democrats are doing.
And what about this judge, Daniel? You already have a population with a potential juror pool that is completely tainted. If Mackey didn't get a fair, Mackey got 10 years for making a meme, basically. And we've done this in the past. It's not only public polling for politics that we do. We do detailed juror research. We try to define juror profiles that work well for certain defendants or, whatever the client may be. In the case of Mackey, at least demographically, and from the life experience of some of those jurors, from occupation to where they came from, immigration status, it actually appeared that that's like the best you could do in that area, and yet still they got a guilty verdict. So on top of that, now you have a judge who looks to be, about as partisan as it gets. I mean, I went through, it took me 2 seconds to go through and find some of the donations that this man has made, and that's fine. Everyone has the right to, it's freedom of speech, right? I mean, essentially protected by, but there have been other cases where he presided and really gave the Trump organization a difficult time. And of course, you have his daughter working for Adam Schiff, him donating to President Obama and Act Blue and all this stuff. I mean, this stinks, man. This stinks. So let's say this judge is, not fair, and they won't dismiss it outright. Does the Trump, Team Trump, the defense, did they have to wait until proceedings move forward before they can appeal like a motion to dismiss, or can they do that relatively quickly? All the appealable motions, file them first, and then if this judge doesn't really hear any of them, then they can go over his head immediately, or do they have to wait for this process to bear out first?
Well, first of all, with respect to the judge, the question about whether something could be done to get another judge, we call that recusal. And whether under New York law, the standard for recusal could be met in this case, I don't know enough, just to shoot you straight. I don't know enough about the judge and don't know enough about what his public statements have been, things of that nature, to say that they could successfully recuse the judge. Just from
it's a high bar, though, right? I mean, it's a high bar.
It's very difficult. I would say anytime somebody asks me about recusal, my default position is it's not going to work. So without something real compelling, I think he's probably going to stick. And but also then you got the other question is, maybe he's not anywhere near the worst out of the judges they had to choose from.
So true.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the judges in New York City to comment on that, but I'm sure that Trump's attorneys do, and that's one of the things you look at is if you're trying to recuse the judge. Hey, am I going to wind up better off or not? And they'll know about that, and they'll know what their likelihoods of, what the likelihood of success is. With respect to bringing up some of the dispositive issues early, I expect them to do that. New York does have some procedures where dispositive issues can be presented to a higher court before trial. If the lower court, in what they call the Supreme Court, actually in New York, the district court says, no, you're going to trial. They have some limited review. It's going to depend on the nature of the claims that are presented. But I will say that it does not appear to me, based on my investigation in New York law, that they have no opportunity, the defense would have no opportunity to get a second look from a higher court at dispositive efforts and motions to dismiss. But it would be limited. You don't have the right to just review everything. So, but they've got some good, very substantial legal issues to raise that they can, and with respect to challenging the indictment itself, that can be done early. So, hopefully they'll pursue some of those.
I want to go down your bullet points. So I want to kind of just give you free reign to do that. But before you do, maybe you touch on this. If this is the theory of the case, and again, help me, I'm not a lawyer, then why isn't Stormy Daniels, Stephanie Clifford, being charged with extortion?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. It's a point that I've raised previously. I don't think we've talked about it, but
no, we haven't. Yeah.
Yeah, there is. Look, Trump's lawyers in other contexts, not in the context of this indictment, but previously, had characterized what was going on with respect to Stormy Daniels in particular as a shakedown, blackmail, extortion, something along those lines. Yeah, I think really, if we were talking about anybody else, that's the way the fake news media would have couched all of this. It would be
Bill Clinton, right? If this was Bill Clinton, exactly. He would be the victim here.
Yeah,
Daniel.
It would all be untrue. It would be a shakedown, and he would have defended himself appropriately, and there'd be no move that would be beyond the pale. But that's just really just the way the news media that reports on all of this has couched it. Now to back off on that just a little bit, is Stormy Daniels was peddling that story to news media. And that's how it got to the National Enquirer and then Michael Cohen. So my understanding is that she didn't reach out or attempt to reach out directly to Trump to say, hey, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do this if you don't give me money, which kind of insulates her camp, somewhat at least from the claim. So it's not a classic blackmail extortion racket because of that.
Okay, so let's go down. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm just gonna give you free reign here. What else did you see? What other observations do you have here?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, there's a couple of issues that at the very beginning are challenging for the government here. One I outlined is they really haven't outlined a crime. You saw Alvin Bragg tell people during his press conference yesterday, our law doesn't require us to tell you that. What's the underlying crime? And we don't have to tell you. Well, they really do. And so I think that's he's incorrect about that. Now they might have to file a bill of particulars. New York used to have a really limited, what they called a short form indictment, where they didn't have to tell you much, but you could go in and say, okay, we need the details here as a due process matter. You would think that in this situation, they would want to maintain the appearance of propriety from the very start. Of course, we didn't get that. All right. But so there's really no crime. Number one, paying someone to bury a story. I'm going to buy this story so that nobody hears it.
Catch and kill.
That is done all the time. You can go back to, you remember, I think the Clinton, during this 1992 race, they called it the bimbo patrol or something like that.
Right. That's right.
Very derogatory. And that's what they were doing, was going around trying to bury these stories. I have a First Amendment right to acquire information and do whatever I choose to do with it. There's nothing criminal about catch and kill. Okay? Nothing, period. The notion, the allegation that there's something nefarious and illegal about that is ludicrous. All right, so that's number one. There's just not a crime here. Number two, how do you influence an election? Everything that Trump's alleged to have done wrong was in 2017, but the election was over. It was done in 2016. So that shouldn't have been done for the purpose of influencing an election. But even if there was anything wrong with that. But the next thing is what I had said about there's no intent to defraud because they didn't cheat anybody and they weren't attempting to cheat anybody out of anything of value. So that's a fundamental failure of the indictment. That's a dismiss this indictment before it goes anywhere type of thing, type of issue. The next issue is it's untimely. There's a 5-year statute of limitations for Class E felonies in the state of New York. From the last commission, the last alleged offense was in December of 2017. This indictment is 5 years, 3 months, and a certain number of days late. With respect to the earlier claims, it's over 6 years. So it's untimely. Now, they do have an out there. They're going to try to argue that Trump was out of the state continuously because prescription or the statute of limitations is told if you're out of the state continuously under the statute of limitations provision of New York law. But the issue they got there is Donald Trump had a residence in New York that he returned to and businesses in New York that he returned to.
Of course.
I think they're not going to get anywhere with that in all probability, but that'll be a question for the court to decide. So it's untimely. But the other issue, an even bigger issue, is the issuance of the indictment itself is untimely. New York law requires, as part of their constitutional right to a speedy trial, that charges be brought quickly against people. So I researched this, turned up, there are courts in New York that have held 12 months between the commission of an offense and an indictment was too long, and that the government had to come in, and if they wait too long, the government has to come in and demonstrate good cause for why the indictment was delayed. There are cases in New York dismissing indictments that were against Class A felonies for which there's no statute of limitations, all kinds of claims like that, with less delay. Now, this delay is between 5 and 6 years, all right, on the indictment. The only issue there is they're going to say, well, he was president. We didn't know if we could bring the claims. But the other problem they got is he hadn't been president for over 2 years. And then they're not going to be able to demonstrate good cause because we know the previous DA didn't charge because he didn't think he could prove the claim. And we have the other ADA or the assistant who resigned in protest and wrote a book.
This is a mess.
We should charge the people. So how are they going to prove good cause? Then Alvin Bragg originally said he wasn't going to pursue it. So they're going to lose on that. And it should. And the indictment should be dismissed right then. So then they have, one other issue, and we could get to it in a minute if you prefer, is you had asked me about ethics, potential ethics violations the last time that I appeared. And we talked about Bragg.
Yes.
And I can elaborate on that if you like.
Yeah, let's just pause for a second though, because this is, I want people to understand what you just said. So, because I saw it trending on Twitter yesterday, and I saw liberals trying to defend it, that he took so long to bring this indictment, and their argument, and you can see it all over Twitter from the legacy blue check kind of journalists and others, even though for the most part, Daniel, everybody was saying this indictment was ridiculous and thin. Everybody was more than ridiculous. Even Van Jones was like, I can't believe this. This better be the first of many because this is nothing. But basically they were arguing, well, we couldn't bring the case because he was president. And what you just said is important. It has still been now over 2 years since he is not president, and they didn't bring these charges. So it shouldn't have taken that long of a time span after he left the White House. If there was truly this crime they knew about, was in the wind, then it should not have taken that long. So people need to understand that, because that was a big talking point yesterday. They should have charged him a year ago or a year and a half ago. That's because they knew this already. The fact is, so for you, before we move on, for you, that looks like it's just so thin that they were looking and looking and looking and looking and came up with nothing, right? And that's what really took so long, right? I mean, from your point of view, you're in this field. This would have been a prosecution already. They were waiting because they had nothing. And then ultimately, this is all they could come up with. And that's what took so long. Isn't that a fair take on why this went as long as it did?
It is, except I would add a little spin to it. And I would say this. They didn't bring it earlier because they didn't have a case and they knew they didn't have a case. And it's not until this Biden DOJ lawyer came to the DA's office that they changed their mind. So really what held them up here was they previously claimed they didn't have a case and they couldn't prove the case and there wasn't a case to bring. So that's why the delay puts the burden on the government under New York law to prove good cause for the delay. And they're just not going to be able to do that. They can't even lie about it. And because of the public statements made previously, and I never thought in a million years that I would be telling anybody that it's a good thing that a prosecutor resigned and wrote a book about charges that haven't been brought against somebody yet. But it is a good thing because the government can't run from it. The city of New York or the Manhattan DA is going to have that wrapped around his neck.
This is just it's such a mess. And for him to not sit up there at that podium again and say what it is or what it is they had that they were charging him, where in the indictment do you see this crime? For them, this is a former president. And to me, what's even more significant is it's the former president who is now a Grover Cleveland like front runner. I mean, that's the thing, Daniel. He's now by far the front runner in the Republican nomination. And yet another poll, and I'm sorry, Rasmussen, if I did you guys dirty before with the interview with Liz Harrington. I didn't know if you didn't release it yet. Apparently they didn't until I said that. But I knew about it and I knew it was coming out because we had very much seen the same thing, a complete backfire, Trump taking a big lead. To me, that's more important because what that says to me is that this is political opposition and they're trying to use the levers of government to take out their leading political opposition. And I'm old enough to remember where that was like a serious offense and it got Donald Trump impeached. All right. So even though these crimes that he was asking Ukraine to look into and asking Rudy Giuliani to go, and actually Zelensky asked for Giuliani. Trump did not say, I'm sending Giuliani. Zelensky asked for Rudy Giuliani. Right. Those were real crimes. That was extortion. It was blackmail. It was blackmail in if you don't fire the prosecutor who is investigating my son, I'm going to hold up $2 billion in foreign aid, which isn't even is money. I mean, that is very different than this. And this guy owed it to the American public. I don't give a damn about New York. I'm from New York. Like I said, I'm ashamed. I don't care about the people of New York or the people of Manhattan. He owes it to the country to lay out why he did what he did, why he took such a big, bold move. If there was a serious crime here, and before we go to break, this is the last thing I want to ask before, and I don't know if you have time to hang around a little bit after the break.
Sure.
Okay, because I want to keep going down your list. But if there was a serious crime here, we would have heard about it, Daniel. This is a man who has been investigated more than anybody else in the history of politics, and this is all they could come up with. And next, what do they have in the barrel next? Twisting the words of a phone call, asking them to find a couple thousand ballots that didn't have signature verification matched. There's nothing wrong with him doing that and simply asking about fraudulent ballots, making sure the ballots were correct in Georgia. If he said, fill in 12,000 ballots for me, then I could understand it. But that's not what he was really saying. So, again, have you ever seen anybody investigated like this and them not turn up like significant crimes? How clean is this guy?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I tell people all the time that most of the time the feds could come investigate anybody and find something. Find somebody that has some prescription medications in the wrong bottle, or somebody that stick something in the mailbox that didn't go through the United States Postal Service. It's illegal under federal law. They can get you on something. Donald Trump is so squeaky clean that they literally had to conjure up nonsense to charge him with.
And which is, again, real estate developer in Queens and Manhattan. It's like, I personally just would not have expected this. You would think you would have found something. It's like hearkening back to Ted Cruz in 2015 and 2016. He's a real estate developer in New York City. He does business with the mob. And it's like, in order to get concrete poured in New York City, you need the mob's okay. All right. For those who live in Candyland and don't know what the hell they're talking about. So if it's like, of course, and yet still they couldn't find something on a real estate developer from New York City. It's astonishing. Yeah. Hang tight if you can. I would really appreciate it because I want to finish up what you have. But I'm just going to take a real quick break. We'll be right back. Hang tight. Yeah, folks. Oh my God. Could you imagine that? Jeez. Anyway, yeah, let's move on. We'll be right back and take a word from our sponsors here. Listen, national security experts are warning that our aging power grid is more vulnerable than ever. January marked the third time a power station in North Carolina, not too far from where I'm sitting, was damaged by gunfire. Authorities are saying the attack, quote, raised a new level of threat. Authorities are now checking our grid for vulnerabilities, and they've identified 9 key substations. If these substations are attacked, power could be knocked out from coast to coast for up to 18 months. Imagine a blackout lasting not days, but months. Your life would be frozen in time at the moment the power fails. Lights all over the country would go out, throwing people into total darkness. And that's why having your own solar power is more important than ever. With the Patriot Power Generator, you get a solar generator that doesn't install into your house because it's portable. You can take it with you, even use it inside. But it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, yeah, even your refrigerator. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com, use the promo code TPP for the People's Pundit to get 10% off your purchase on anything in the store, including the Patriot Power Generator. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. And a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com, use the code TPP10, and you'll get 10% off. Again, that's 4patriots.com. Use the code TPP10 to get your 10% discount today. Listen, if you're going to go and get that 3-month survival kit, I know for those who watch the show every time, I'm a broken record, but I'm doing my consumer protection duty here. If you're going to get the 3 months survival kit, which is the best kit on the market, Laura and I have multiple of them, then you'll want to wait to see what you get with that kit before you may buy some other stuff like you see behind me, such as the water filter, the solar water filter, anything else, because the free gifts you get are worthwhile. They are useful. All right. So you want to use that code for something that is definitely going to maximize your savings. Again, 4patriots.com and use the code TPP10. All right. At checkout, get 10% off. All right, listen, I'm 41, folks. I've tried it all under the sun. All right. And junk science. That's what the doctors tell me every time I bring them something new. Junk science, especially when it comes to supplements like this, because they use fruit and vegetable supplements. Junk science because they use extracts of common produce department fruits and vegetables that have few health benefits. Now I take Field of Greens because it's the whole organic fruit and vegetable, not a watered down supplement. And it's backed by their Better Health Promise. Each ingredient in Field of Greens was scientifically chosen to support vital organs like heart, lungs, and kidney health. Others support my immune system, blood pressure, metabolism, and, important for me, healthy weight loss. I don't need to eat as healthy as I should, which who of us does, right? That's why I take Field of Greens. Like me, you'll probably look and feel healthier fast and have way more energy. But your best proof will be at your next checkup when your doctor says, whatever you're doing, it's working. Keep it up. Let's get you started today with 15% off. Visit fieldofgreens.com. Use the promo code TPP for the People's Pundit. That's promo code TPP at fieldofgreens.com. And they have different flavors. We would love for you guys to send us your feedback. Lemon, lime, berry. Which one's your favorite? How was your experience? All right. We would love to hear from you because we get them all the time and absolutely do. But I will say this, like I say this again too. It's like a broken record, but you will, if you're like me and like the people who send us emails, you will feel healthier fast. Keep it up, though. Wait for that 2-week mark. Wait for that 4-week mark. All right. Then email me. All right. Jam and Bean has a great new offer that I have got to tell you about because I don't know how long it's going to last. At checkout, when you subscribe for the first time, you sign up for a new coffee subscription. Use promo code TPP40. Yeah, 40. And you will get 40% off that first subscription. And still get 10% off on your subsequent subscription renewals. All right. Maybe in a little bit, if I have time, I'll eat some of the new flavored popcorn they sent me. All right. Because I got to tell you, that's another totally delicious treat that they offer. But the coffee for everybody, if you're on the fly like I am and you need K-Pods, they got them. If you're also like me, but when you have time, you like to sit down and steep coffee, French press, whatever it is, they got something for you. Again, jamandbean.com. Use the promo code TPP40. They happen to be patriots who own this business, and they also happen to be artists in the what is really an art of coffee roasting. And like I said, send me your comments, send Laura and I your comments. We love to hear them. All right. Nothing but good stuff. Nothing but good stuff. Go ahead, Laura. You got something to say?
You will not eat that popcorn.
Oh, that's not fair. So we got to try your apple pie, but I don't get my white cheddar? Not fair. Oh, now she's not even popping back in. Oh, I got sandbagged. Go ahead.
No comment.
No comment. And the caramel, this one right here, caramel mocha latte is delicious. Daniel, it leaves such an aftertaste. Oh my God. These people are amazing because like gourmet popcorn is really expensive. Like if you buy gourmet popcorn, it's really expensive. This is not at all. And it's delicious and it's natural. Talking about, look, I'm not, one of those crazy lefties, but I am in organic stuff. There is a difference, so if I can get it, then I'm all over it. All right, so let's move forward, Daniel, with your next bullet point. What's the next thing you observed here from this indictment?
Yeah, and actually, you touched on it earlier about the way the DA in Manhattan had just really, in my estimation, just disregarded his duty, and that is that the to make the felony, there has to be another crime. The false records or false notations have to be done with the purpose with the intent to defraud, and either in furtherance of or to conceal another crime, and there is no crime. And that goes back to what hasn't been charged. That pertains to the only thing that could conceivably possibly would be a campaign finance violation. And I know we talked about this before. We talked about this last week, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but there isn't one. And there's a bigger question is, can the state of New York charge somebody based on what they claim is their interpretation of what is or is not a federal crime, particularly when the federal authorities didn't find the person for what the state of New York might claim is the offense, didn't charge the person, even though they investigated it, So not only is there not a crime, that just the entire indictment doesn't have a crime. It doesn't delineate an underlying crime. So that fails. But the other point that I wanted to mention, because you had talked the last time I was on, and you had asked about the ethics of the charges.
Yeah.
And whatnot. And yesterday during the press conference that the Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, held, and look, let me tell you, let me back up for a second. I don't go around saying that lawyers did things that were unethical, and because that's a bold statement.
It's a bold statement in your field. It is, yeah.
But that press conference is very, very. I honestly don't see how anyone could correlate it with and conform it with the New York professional rules governing lawyers, particularly with respect to trial publicity. So I wanted to mention this. The rule is Rule 3.6, and it says a lawyer participating in a criminal matter should not make an extrajudicial statement that the lawyer knows or reasonably should know would be disseminated by means of public communication and will have a substantial likelihood of materially prejudicing a proceeding. And then it gives you some things that are prejudicial. A statement ordinarily is likely to produce prejudice materially if it relates to, 1, the character, credibility, reputation, or criminal record of a party or suspect in a criminal investigation. Alvin Bragg besmirched President Trump half the press conference yesterday. Yep. Said he lied about this and lied about that. He's not supposed to do that. Number 2, in a criminal matter that could result in incarceration, having an opinion as to guilt or innocence, or sharing information the lawyer knows or reasonably should know would be likely to be inadmissible, which he did that. And so when you add it all together, he's making prejudicial statements. Alvin Bragg was making presidential public statements completely in violation of this rule. So I'm asking myself, why would he do that? Why would he do that? And I think the whole point, what it uncovered to me is that the whole point behind this exercise is not to obtain a conviction, but to interfere in the presidential election. This is political. His
Boom.
press conference was all political, and I don't know how he would get out of discipline if somebody filed a complaint about it. It was that bad.
Wow,
So,
I don't want to interrupt you, but that's a big statement. And, that goes back, because it's funny you say that, because this is what I was going to ask you. And this is really just your personal opinion, because you just laid it out. You just laid up the codes for it. But, I mean, this to me is clearly an attempt to influence the election. If they can get a conviction, then great. But, I'm listening to CNN, I'm listening to MSNBC. And there really is a common theme, which is, oh, this was thin, but, it's just going to be the first. We have all these other things, and that is going to politically hurt him, and to me, they're tipping their hand, Daniel. They're tipping their hand here. And I'm curious what your opinion is. I'm not opposed to prosecuting a former president. I don't think they should be above the law because they're just former presidents, but there has to be a crime, man. And there definitely has to be a crime if he happens to be the front runner for the presidential election again. That's to me the difference here. And I'm wondering, as a lawyer, if you think, if you agree, it does seem like in the establishment ruling class, presidents are just off limits. George W. Bush, when you're talking about Republicans doing the same, there are crimes that appear to have been committed on their face by Barack Obama, by Joe Biden, by, the Clintons. And, I don't know that a prosecutor or a DA would have to go searching very hard for them. But it seems like the ruling class just puts them, they're off limits, unless you're Richard Nixon. But, they're off limits that you don't prosecute them. This is different. They're like searching for one, even though there is no crime on its face. They're searching for one. And this guy now is a candidate. And that to me is the difference. I want to know your thoughts on that. Where do you stand on that? How do you feel about it?
Well, first of all, if someone's going to charge a former president, and particularly one who's running, for re-election, number one, these need to be really, really solid, unquestionable charges. They need to be very, very serious. I could think of 1,000 things that a president could be charged for or should be charged for, killing somebody, robbing somebody, something like that. So there's definitely a different standard at play here. Vincent Bugliosi, if you remember, the prosecutor out in LA that prosecuted the Manson murders and wrote the book Helter Skelter and some other books, wrote a book in the early 2000s or mid 2000s about what he alleged were war crimes that he contended that George W. Bush committed. I'm not saying he was right.
Yeah.
But the point being that there are people who say that presidents in the past had committed very serious crimes, and none of them were ever charged for it, with the exception of Bill Clinton, obviously, with respect to his. Well, I guess he was impeached. He wasn't charged with the crime, but. Yeah, so I'm not philosophically opposed to the notion that a president may be subject to prosecution, but it would need to be something that's beyond the pale, and there's no question about it. And clearly, none of the above is present in any of the current investigations involving President Trump or indictment.
Can the president be charged for something they did when they were the president? So, for instance, like Barack Obama handed over hostages, whatever you want to call them. It's against the law. Handed them over to the Iraqi government when they knew the Iraqi government commits acts of torture. It's against the law, for folks who don't know this, for the U.S. government to hand over. It's international law as well, to hand over prisoners of war to any entity, nation state, party, whatever, that is known to commit torture on their captives. And yet they did it. So is there something that protects a president from something like that, Daniel? Or, for instance, Joe Biden is being pushed to respond in Afghanistan after the Marines are killed, and oops, we meant to kill ISIS-K, but instead we annihilated a family, including a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old kid, 2 kids. I mean, is there something that can be, or do they have some kind of protections for that?
Well, that's a great question, Rich. And actually, there's not a real good answer for it. I will tell you that
I've tried to look.
Yeah, the Constitution does not say that a president is immune from prosecution while he's in office. That is an interpretation that the United States Department of Justice has come up with based on their analysis of the Constitution. And so if you look at the issues that have been raised with respect to litigation with the president, with the sitting president, and the courts have analyzed it as, is this going to disrupt the president's ability to govern? And the United States Department of Justice, for its purposes, says prosecuting a sitting president would disrupt his ability to govern, so you can't do it. But the Constitution actually does not say that. Now, to move forward with that, we just don't have any real legal precedent from court cases where somebody tries to prosecute a sitting president to say, oh, you can't do that. There's a couple of references from long ago, back in the 1900s and 1800s and 1900s, with references to not being able to litigate with the president, but that was back when individuals could try to personally charge people with crimes. So there's just not much authority on it. And but I will tell you, in the absence of some direct expression in the Constitution, there's certainly nothing that would insulate a president, in my view, and based on what I know about the law, from being prosecuted after getting out of office for something that was done while he was in office.
I was just thinking, it's the heinous crimes that many, including several who are still alive, presidents committed, to have John Trump be the first former president ever to be charged. And something so flimsy as this, when you have had war crimes against humanity, and look, I'm not trying to be an America basher here. It's just the truth, for this to be the first charge, it just is so pathetic. It's pathetic, and it makes us look so badly on the world stage. I got a friend in Switzerland, and she's like, you got to see the foreign press. They're just having a field day with this. The United States, Mr. Arrogance, Mr. and Mrs. Arrogance, high ground, Mr. Moral, Uncle Moral Sam, look at them now. And they're just mocking us. So at least if we were able to bring a case against a former president who is like a real crook, then maybe that would have, borne out better for us, Daniel.
Rich, real quick, I wanted to comment. You were talking about Biden earlier, and I believe it's because of Joe Biden's advanced dementia that I believe he suffers. That's my opinion. I'm not a doctor, but I think he tells you what they're really up to. He said it
on accident.
Yeah, back in 2020, he said, we put together the most robust voter fraud organization in history, and he did it.
Oops.
Yeah, the other day he said, we're not going to let Donald Trump run for president again. We've got all the machinations at work to put a stop to that. I mean, what happens is his mind's not sophisticated enough to filter the things he shouldn't say.
And he did it on Nord Stream too. Do I still have the clip? I don't even know, but I may still have the clip. And Seymour Hersh reported that when he did that, and I don't still have the clip, when he did that, they were pissed because he just blew up their plans to blow up Nord Stream, live. But then they said, well, maybe we can actually use this to our advantage because now we can at least, we can make a go of it. But they were mad. And anyone who's ever, if Joe Kent was on right now, he'd tell you that the president doing that is unbelievably unprecedented. To throw a special operator team under the bus, or you're planning for some crazy snatch and grab of a high value target in HVT, and the president goes to the microphone and just blurts out what you're going to do. I mean, man, Daniel, that's new. I think you're absolutely right. I think you're right. I think he's not there. He's not, you know, and he lets these things go. Go ahead.
One other point I wanted to make, just anecdotal for all your viewers and listeners, is that there actually has been a president of the United States who was charged with a crime during his term in office. And it was President Grant, Ulysses Grant, was charged. He was racing his horse through D.C. and got a ticket. and he went and paid it. So apparently he didn't try to fight it, you know.
Probably drunk as a skunk, knowing Ulysses S. Grant, right? Probably drunk as a skunk. But again, that's another, you know, example. Yeah, sure, hero of the Civil War, but also a complete and total corrupt politician. You know, so I mean, yeah, I mean, I know we like to praise these guys, but you know, not his administration was corrupt, and he didn't do a whole lot about it, and so were those who came after him. And it's amazing to me, again, with all of these examples, and they're rich with them, that this would be the first time, you know, that you would go after a former president like this. It's insane to me. I kept you a long time, Daniel, and I want to take a second here to go over some of your work, because it is, again, fantastic. Just for people who have not read these books, there are 3 volumes. They are fantastic. I've read them all, and it's Fake News Exposed. And what Daniel does that other like journalists don't do is, from, you know, probably from, because he's from a lawyer's perspective, is really document these cases and how they played out. Because during the Trump era, Daniel, and you can speak to this more. First, well, real quick, Fake News Exposed About Trump, Volume 1, 25 of the worst media lies and biased attacks on President Trump and his family. Volume 2 is 29 more of the worst media lies and biased attacks on President Trump and his family. And then we now have Volume 3, which is 29 more. But there all is a different angle from which Daniel comes at them, and they're fantastic. This is stuff, you know, we always said during the Trump era, context always mattered with these fake news stories, and they would always try to obfuscate timelines. You know, they would obfuscate the story and the timeline of the story and the fact patterns. And what Daniel does, I think, again, as a lawyer, is put them back, the pieces back in their place, so you can really appreciate how fake these stories were. And that's what I think you do that, like, you know, Byron York with Obsession. I mean, I've read a lot of them. They don't do, you know, and that is why it's important, because you're giving tools to the reader, you know, so in the future, the reader can know what to look for. And that's what I think you do differently than others do, Daniel. But yeah, I want to kick it to you, and, you know, what got you started with this, and let people know, let the audience know why they should pick these up.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, I have to say, Rich, nobody in America was happier than I am when President Trump announced he was running in 2024. You know, because I said
another book.
All those stories remain relevant. You know, I really started writing the books. I really started just by keeping up with President Trump, and I saw the media, and what really was different, not just the media attacking him, but the Republican establishment attacked him, and almost immediately. And I said, man, I can't think of anything that tells me this candidate is over the target than the fact that the Republicans attack him, and the Democrats attack him, and the media attacks him. And he had absolutely none of what an Air Force pilot would call top cover. He had nobody trying to help him. And I started keeping up with the stories. And then eventually there were so many, I said, man, I think I can write a book out of this. And I wound up writing 3. So actually, Rich, I have another book I'm working on now. It goes beyond just President Trump. But the beautiful part about Donald Trump running again is this misinformation propaganda machine on steroids is just full bore, unleashed. Nothing's holding them back. And for me, for somebody who enjoys writing about that and exposing it and uncovering it, there's a lot of low hanging fruit. So if you want to know the truth about a lot of stories about President Trump, you mentioned the Fulton County DA's charges. Investigation. There's no charges. I'm sorry. The investigation down in Fulton County, which is where Atlanta is in Georgia, is completely most of her public statements about the call that President Trump was on are misstatements and misinformation. President Trump did not tell the Secretary of State to go find 11,769 more votes for him. He suggested that the guy should look for and find, because he would if he looked, 11,769 is my recollection, illegal votes. And there's nothing wrong with that. Hey, look, all you got to do is find 12,000 illegal votes out of the 150,000 that were cast, and I'm the winner. You know, there's nothing illegal about that statement, and not to mention the fact that it was made in the context of settlement discussions, which are ordinarily confidential. So you put all that together. There's a chapter on that in volume 1. It's all just almost everything that people have been told about President Trump. I mean, that's an overstatement, but a lot of what people have been told about President Trump is just flat out misinformation. And I cover those in volumes 1, 2, and 3. They're available at Amazon. You can go to my website, danielrstreet.com. I've got them pinned. One of them, the triple ebooks, pinned at my Twitter page, and also have a Substack, which is Daniel R. Street at Substack.
Now, just out of curiosity, because I've read them, I want to know, back when I was the editor of PVD, we did 4 media lies, 4 early media lies to paint Donald Trump as a racist. And we did that research kind of like retroactively, going back and reading. Do you take notes on these stories as they're debunked and then say this is going in the book, or do you research it like retroactively? Because you caught stories, and I'm telling you folks, pick these books up, you're going to see them, you're going to be like, oh my God, I forgot about that. Yeah. Or you caught stories that are not in the typical vocabulary of every day when we're talking about stories that they pushed against Trump that was fake, or his family. Because Don Jr. is a big one. The WikiLeaks one, the date. Remember that with CNN? That's in there. It's like you go back and you're like, oh, man, I forgot about that story. Are you taking notes, Daniel, as the days go on, or are you going back?
Every day. I take notes every day.
I
have a series of every morning, at least 6 days a week. I go through and I check a number of media sources. And I'm sad to say this. I subscribe to the worst fake news peddlers in the world. Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, and it just so I can keep up with the misinformation, and I categorize them, and I come back. Some of them I know are untrue at the moment I read them. Some I suspect are untrue, and I have to wait for the truth to come out. And so I'm keeping up with it every day. Honestly, for me, it's entertaining. Practicing law is not a whole lot of fun. They make it look glamorous on television. It's really not. And it's a lot of sitting and staring at a computer, probably a lot like what you do, Rich.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
A lot of staring at a computer, a lot of rubbing your eyes and, talking to people. And investigating the fake news is what I do for fun. And since the Trump era came about, there's never been more of it. And it's really, you talk about pandemics, it's epidemic. It's
epidemic now. Yeah. Yeah, I suspected that's what you did because, there's just no way you could go back and try to dig through that. You have to be someone who's keeping up with it to be that thorough. And I think that's a big part of the difference in some of the other ones that I've read that have come out. And what you're doing is that you're on top of it. This is your thing, and you're prosecuting the case. Others are trying to go back and put the pieces together afterwards, which, by the way, results in really an incomplete work because you're doing this a lot of times, especially when you categorize them together like that, you're doing them in order. So you're showing people how these lies unfolded and sometimes how they compounded these lies. Lastly, and I know I've kept you a while, I'll let you go, but, we had Glenn Kessler, Molly Hemingway went at him yesterday. Glenn Kessler cropped out Trump Jr. and Eric's tweets, which were just sharing news stories. One was from Breitbart, you were on that. I imagine you were on that, right? This is the fact checker at the Washington Post. So I had said, wouldn't it be funny if he gets a Twitter tag, misleading, taken out of context? Sure enough, that happened. And then later in the day, NPR gets a label, a Twitter label that says state-run media.
And on top of that,
Delicious.
The New York Times last week, the New York Times lost their blue check.
That's right. And this is way late. And and I'll take it. I'll take it now, man. Yeah. But it's late. It's a long time coming. These people, they survive on the system gives their credibility, and that most Americans understand that the media is corrupt, but they still have that aura of credibility because of things like that. Automatically they get a blue check and we get banned. So it tells people that aren't really paying attention who's credible and who's not, and that's not correct. That's not right. That's a cartelized system. It's cartel of information. This is look, I applaud Elon Musk for that, my friend. I really do.
Hey, Rich, I thought you'd appreciate this when I saw what was circulating around about the Washington Post fact checker. I came in under somebody and I commented. I said, quote, Washington Post fact checker. I said, there are 4 words that should never be used together in that order.
Where's the lie count for Joe Biden? The guy lies every time he opens his mouth. When Trump would be accused of a lie, it was like sometimes he would say something that's like true, but he would say it in the wrong way, or he would use the wrong terminology, and they would slap him with a lie, like the mail-in vote stuff, right? Yeah. Like there had always been mail-in voting in states like Florida and states like Arizona, and there weren't problems with it. That was not, but the heart of what he was saying, that you could, this system can be exploited if you expand it without proper, procedural rules to verify. That the heart of what he was saying was true. He would just state it in a way that wasn't exactly true. Joe Biden says demonstrably false things every time he opens his mouth, and there's no counter on the Washington Post, Daniel.
No. And in fact, the comment that with the topic you were just talking about, which was President Trump's comments about mail-in balloting. There's a chapter on that in volume 1 of the book. He was dead on. But what President Trump would do.
Obama spied on my campaign is another one.
Yeah. But he would make these statements. Like if you remember during one of the debates, he was talking about wind energy. And he says, oh, it's intermittent. It's really expensive and it kills all the birds. So they say, oh, it doesn't kill all the birds. And it birds, and so they would nitpick everything that Trump says. And then Trump has this method or manner of speaking that's a kind of a fluid thought, kind of flood the world with thoughts method of speech.
Old school New York. Yeah.
And then, of course, that old school New York is kind of real reactionary, in your face. If you attack me, I'm gonna attack you times 2. If you know anybody from New York City, it's very common. And you put all that together and you get this media frenzy. But then Biden gets up there, he'll just spew complete nonsense. And they go,
things that are just not true. Like the fentanyl that killed that girl came over under Trump. What are you talking about? Americans stuck the fentanyl in their arms that came over Trump 2 years ago. We consume fentanyl on a ridiculous, massive level. What are you talking about? There is no fentanyl left over, Daniel, from when Donald Trump was president. Maybe someone stored it in a warehouse somewhere and didn't get to come back for it because they got whacked or something. That's the only way. There's some kind. And it's way worse than that. The immigration stuff he lies about all the time. Inflation decreased last month. No, it didn't. These are lies that obviously can be proven, and they don't touch him.
No, they leave him, and they treat him with respect.
That's right.
Trump, you could juxtapose. All you got to do is pull up 2 White House press briefings. Pull up one with Sarah Huckabee, pull up one with whoever, Jen Psaki, for instance, and watch how the White House press corps treated the 2. And Psaki would be up there. We're going to circle back to that, not answer a question. Sarah would tell them exactly what the answer was. And they were just unprofessional and would berate her. And then they just lob softballs at people.
Yeah, I tell you, adversarial is not even the word. They're supposed to be adversarial. But what they did to both, Sarah Sanders, Sean Spicer in the beginning, he got off to a bad start with them. They felt like he insulted them with the crowd size thing. That was like, because I've actually talked to people about this. They thought that was like some unforgivable sin or something. So they got off on the wrong foot, and they never let him. They never gave him respect after that. Kayleigh McEnany, it didn't matter who it was. They got this treatment that was unprecedented, and it was disrespectful to the voter, because the voter is the sovereign in this country. And you're at least supposed, you may not respect the guy that they elected, but you got to respect the office. And they didn't give him that respect, which means they didn't give the voter that respect. And that is something that was new. And here, this guy is lying on the daily, and they're not holding them to account. It's typical disgrace beyond bias. We're in a different world. But yeah, Daniel, I really appreciate you. I kept you a long time, man. I really appreciate you hanging out. Again, tell people one more time, it's danielrstreet.com, but where can they follow you on social media? Because I know you got your stuff on there as well.
Yeah, Daniel R. Street 1 is my Twitter handle. I'm on Truth Social as Daniel R. Street. And my Substack is Daniel R. Street at Substack. And the books you can go find on Amazon, or you can go to my website, danielrstreet.com, and there's links to all of the above.
You muted yourself.
Oh, I said, I did mute myself. I was just going to say, pick them up. You will not be disappointed. And I hope you come back soon. There'll be a lot to talk about on this, sure. Daniel. I hope you come back and, and as we go through this process and work us through it.
Yep. Thanks for having me, and y'all have a nice day.
You too. All the best. DanielRstreet.com, folks. DanielRstreet.com. I'm telling you, pick those books up. They're excellent. I'm like reading through them, rifling through. I got one on my end table right now still, because I go back and I reference it. And I say, you know what? Remember that one? Remember this one? It's completely beyond bias. You can't read Street's books and not draw the conclusion that they do this on purpose. You don't make mistakes like this frequently, that often. Look, Glenn Kessler, which I'm sure is going to make it in the new book, Glenn Kessler cropped those images on purpose. Sometimes they're just mistakes. But I guarantee you read any one of those volumes, if not all three. I would say pick them all up. I got all three of them. You read them and you cannot come to any other conclusion. Then they gave each other awards for some of this stuff. It's just incredible. Incredible. So thank God Elon Musk stripped the New York Times of their verification. Put a clown up next to them. NPR is state-run media. Even private corporations, news corporations, are still essentially state media, because they're just regurgitating the narrative of the state. They're just not paid by them directly. They get all their lobbyists to advertise on their channels. Pfizer. You turn to Fox News right now, every single commercial break. Laura and I love to do this. It's kind of like a hobby of ours. We'll be like, whoa, wait for this one. This one's a real good one. Let your doctor know if you have any side effects concerning, heartburn, indigestion, diarrhea, heart attack, stress. If you're having thoughts about killing your loved ones, killing yourself. Right, Laura? If you're thinking about harming your little baby, you may want to talk to your doctor about it. I mean, they're just, right? Don't we have like this game? Like, oh, whoa, this is a good one. Have you seen this one?
Oh, yeah. We like to compare these side effects. Or my favorite is sudden death may occur. But if sudden death occurs, it's a day late, $1 short, no?
Yeah, no kidding. Right? Talk to your Talk to your doctor of sudden death. If you experience sudden death syndrome. Like what? Wait, what?
Well, my fear is that, may cause tuberculosis. Oh, okay. TB. Yay.
How many of these say they cause tuberculosis? How many of these? Oh my God.
Count that. We need to count that and see.
Holy crap. Planet Express, we definitely will get in. I think we did talk a little bit about this in the beginning, but, generally speaking, again, that's why I said really when we were putting up the maps, pay attention to the counties. yes, margins matter, but sometimes margins can be the data concerning margins and what you should infer from them can be a little bit distorted if there's a significant turnout differential. So, for instance, in Dane County, where there was, without a doubt, some pretty significant, youth vote for a special election like this, or I wouldn't even say youth, but Gen Z. That's why you saw Kelly, I would argue, lose areas like Brown, lose areas worse than, typical among Dane. Honestly, in Milwaukee, it's always very, very close, whether you're at 28 or you're at 31. When you're talking about Ron Johnson and Donald Trump got just under 30. Ron Johnson, I believe, got 30. 29.8. So very much, actually, that's identical almost to Donald Trump. 29.4 Donald Trump got. So, when you're looking at states like counties like Sauk, but definitely out where Green Bay is, Brown County, I think that's what happened here. You just saw that Democrats more efficiently got their vote out. But that's overall the problem. Is that a messaging issue? Like Ronna McDaniel said, I don't think it's a messaging issue. I think it's beyond that. I mean, messaging is when you can just tell the story and, you know what? Can I get her clip and then I'll be able to explain it differently. Let's see if I can get her clip. I'm sure I can. I could at least pull it up on Twitter and share it. But let's see. Yeah, nobody wants to have a clip of her up. There we go. All right, so she blamed the pro-life movement, which is, hold on, I'm going to pull it up. The bottom line is it's more than that. They could not get out the vote, period. It's not just the pro-choice voter, the pro-life voter. I think we made it very clear that it's beyond all that. But let's listen to what she has to say. And when we do, we will come back afterward because I'll be able to explain more of what I mean by the difference. It's a great question, Planet Express. Great question. And I know we got blasted through. We got lots of comments rolling in. So when we aggregate them like that, I could lose you real quick. All right, so let's play that. And because I do want to spend the rest of the time talking about, largely talking about Wisconsin. All right. The bottom line is, well, let's listen to Ronna first, shall we?
But I will say something else. When you're losing by 10 points, there is a messaging issue, and abortion is still an issue. And we can't allow the Democrats to define Republicans and put millions of dollars up in lies and have it go unanswered, because the lies become the truth if they go unanswered. We have to put the Democrats on the defense on this issue, talk about the fact that they support gender.
Okay, but like David Giglio just tweeted out to you, where the hell were you? Where the hell were you? You know what? We need to get David back on the show. David's got to get back on the show. Where the hell were you? Democrats came to the rescue for Janet. Where were you for Dan? So, you're over here complaining that there wasn't enough money spent. Is it really a messaging issue or is it an image issue? There's a big difference between messaging and image. The maps we just showed you, margins can be expanded by turnout differentials. The geography and the ethnic origin question is a much bigger concern for Republicans. Voters do not see you as the party that you claim to be unless a certain guy is on the ticket. And then they will only pull the lever for everyone else with the R next to their name with the hope that that R backs him up. But they didn't, did they? You have an image problem, not a messaging problem. When you lose Tucson 2-1, but the voters support an amendment or a provision, about immigration, for instance, that is textbook Donald Trump's position, then you have an image problem. You don't have a messaging problem anymore. I digress.
Selection abortions and due date abortions. It was an issue in 2022. The RNC raised the flag. I'm a suburban woman.
What?
woman. I know this is an issue. I hear it with my friends, with my young daughter. This is not an issue that's going away for our party in a post-Dobbs world, and we can't put our head in the sand and think it's going to heading into 2024.
Well, that part is true. All right. But did the People's Pundit not do the deepest dive ever in abortion out of any other pollster I've seen yet about whether or not you're pro-life or you're pro-choice, and yet do you support or oppose specific policies and provisions? You can't get to the message if your image is tarnished. They didn't answer back. The RNC raised the flag. Really? Because I had John Gibbs and others calling me who the RNC and the NRCC told to fire me. All right. I get them through the primaries. I defeat their flawed establishment candidates. And then they're told, we're not going to help you until you hire our crowd. Our crowd tells them to not answer these attacks. So I don't know honestly, the raise the flag thing, I don't know where that's coming from. Because I had all these people from Gibbs to J.R. Majewski and others saying they were being instructed not to fight back, not to speak about specifics on abortion. What would you have me do? By the time they even realized they had a problem, their unfavorable ratings, very unfavorables, were in the 40s.
But I will say something else. When you're losing by 10 points, there is a messaging issue.
Okay, so that's it. I mean, that's a wrap. We can call it that. Again, I think that what that does, Planet, is give them a turnout advantage because their voters are more excited on that issue. But we've been over this time and time again. And you know what? Let me see if I still have it. The difference between pro-life and pro-choice is not that large. It's not. Hold on. Let me pick it up. The main problem here is that Republicans' views on abortions and proposals. I bookmark this link. All right, hold on. It's redirecting. Give it a second. Okay, let's pull this up. Because this is what the American public thinks about this issue. Yes, more are pro-life than are pro-choice. I mean, more pro-choice than are pro-life. But as even Gallup has shown, it has swung back and forth over the years quite a bit. The issue we're talking about here is whether or not those who say they're pro-choice, they're pro-life, still know even what that means as you get through the specifics, all right? Do you support or oppose abortion being legal during each of the following stages of pregnancy after a heartbeat has been detected? 17% of the pro-life movement says they still support it. 21% of the pro-choice movement says they oppose it. A huge chunk of the pro-choice movement has no idea. They were either unsure or had no opinion. And by the way, look at how many, when they say they're unsure or have no opinion about their abortion designation, still more than 3-to-1 people who don't know whether they're pro-life or pro-choice, by a 3-to-1 margin, still oppose abortion after a heartbeat has been detected. The law that was passed in Florida is a textbook example of a law that reflects the position of vast majority. And I'm not the only one who did this for them. Understand, Robert Cahaley also did, it just wasn't public, also did a deep dive for South Carolina Republicans and others. He found generally exactly what I found, which is that people will say they're pro-choice and Americans inherently want to favor rights, not restrictions. But then when you get into the specifics of these policies, you lose them. Do you support or oppose abortion being legal after doctors determine a baby can feel pain? If you're pro-choice, a third of pro-choice voters oppose it. If you said you didn't know whether you were pro-choice or whether you were when you were pro-life, 44% still oppose it. And of course, the vast majority of pro-lifers oppose it. It becomes a majority position. How about during the final 3 months of a pregnancy? 55% who say they are pro-choice oppose abortion being legal during the final 3 months of pregnancy. 51% who didn't know whether they were pro-life or pro-choice, which is a big amount in polling. It's not a small amount. Still opposed late-term abortion. And of course, almost 9 out of 10 pro-lifers do, making it a super majority held position. Folks, if you can't get a message through to voters with these kinds of numbers in favoring your position, then you have beyond a messaging problem. You have an image problem. How about any time during the pregnancy, which is a little bit convoluted of a question, 32% of voters who are unsure with their designation oppose that open-ended language, and almost a third of pro-choice voters still oppose it, making a near majority, strong plurality who oppose, and only 21% support. By the way, what about late-term abortion? 17%. What about after doctors determine a baby can feel pain, which is generally the 20-week plus mark? 24%. Even fetal heartbeats. Only less than a third of this country supports allowing abortion after a fetal heartbeat has been detected. We've been doing polling like this for over a decade. Over a decade. One of the first ones we did was when a new Republican Congress in 2024, having both chambers, considered the Pain and Patient Protection Act or something. They caved. They were scared. Instead of making the case that, yeah, okay, the case of rape and incest, like Florida's law, it's so minuscule that I understand people who say they're not for it. All life is precious. I get that, folks, but you're not enabling the wholesale murdering of babies if you put that exception in there. The percentage of abortions that are due to a rape and incest is infinitesimal. Most abortions are conducted when you look at the groups who get abortions. The largest group is females, and they do it out of economic reasons, or at least more of them, a plurality of them do it for economic reasons. The demographic that Rona's talking about is the second largest demographic for abortions. That is the white woman. The white, not poor woman who does it, citing reasons like, a baby would interrupt my life right now. I don't want to destroy my body. That stuff doesn't fly with the American public. And it's very simple. You got a messaging problem. You shame these people. Because women aren't the ones who support this. You're not losing with women suburban voters because of that. You could do a better job messaging them. The truth is, more women say they're pro-choice than men, but in many of these instances, you will start to see men on par, or if not, at higher rates later in pregnancies than women supporting abortions after these certain stages of pregnancy. After the first 3 months, there are more men than women who support it. There are more men than women who support when a baby can feel pain, still allowing abortions. And there are more men than women who support aborting children in the final 3 months of the pregnancy and in any time during the pregnancy. These are so-called men who want to have a fail-safe. What do I mean by that? They want to have sex and not have to have the responsibility or the consequences that come with it. That's the dirty truth about it. How about you have the courage to actually say it? You cannot fight Democrats on this issue in their world. You cannot make this argument in this tight little, neat little box from the 1990s that they constructed for you. And by the way, you can swamp the turnout advantage that comes from the Generation Z voters and stuff like that, if you have a guy that actually appeals to them more. Or a message. Don't stab that guy in the back every day. Why is he doing so much better with 18 to 24-year-olds and 25 to 29s? He's the man who nominated the justices that overruled Roe v. Wade, that overturned Roe v. Wade. How is he doing better than you? Messaging. No, it's an image. Messaging comes after image.
You define your image and then you get your message across with that image, which you hope is the image you're trying to portray to voters. Trump's is weird because it's like, I know you don't like me, but you know you can trust me to do this. I'm competent. I get things done. I know you don't like me, but hey, at least I'm not going to sell you up the river. I know you don't like me, but hey, you know where I stand. That's how Scott Walker won 3 elections in the state of Wisconsin. This is a really good question. Ashwin, and by the way, thanks for your super chat, Ashwin. I saw. Hi, Rich. Couple of questions. Barnes said key election rule changes that have happened since 20 in key states are enough for Trump to win them in 24. Do you agree? And is Trump ready to ballot harvest? All great questions. I think Georgia did have, listen, there are some pretty, even though Georgia was not how I would have personally done it. All right. There is major wins for the election integrity side in Georgia. Okay. So you can't disproportionately put these ballot boxes in ballot drop boxes, in blue areas. You can't have the money that's going towards these efforts disproportionately in urban centers. There is difference in verification procedures now, although it's not as strong as I would have liked. It's just not. Virginia is another state where there has been some changes on the ground where people are observing when they were not before. In Nevada, Joe Lombardo is about to make some sweeping changes. I do think Donald Trump will probably carry the state of Nevada this time. All right. Why do I say that? Because we had Laxalt up. We had him up by a tiny bit. It was very close, well within the sampling error. That's not a polling miss. We nailed Lombardo's margin. All right. So looking at how we gauge Lombardo and Laxalt support in Clark County and Washoe County, we really nailed it. I mean, we did. Lombardo really was only 4 points behind in Clark County. He really was. He was slightly ahead in Washoe. He really was. So when I'm looking at Trump's numbers in the polling, I can't help but to think, obviously, we were right about Trump being way ahead in Nevada as well. And I mean, pretty. I think it would be closer than the polling we did suggest, because that's Nevada. Sometimes it can overstate Republican support. But if we were really right about Lombardo support in Vegas, then we were really right about Trump support in Vegas, which is Trump would probably carry Clark County. I mean, it would be close, but he could probably carry it at this point because his support among Hispanic men is so much higher. Washoe, I actually think, would be a little bit more difficult, even though our polling had Trump up, I believe, it had him up 4 in Clark when we had Lombardo down by 4 in Clark, and Lombardo up in Washoe by 2 and Trump up by 8 in Washoe. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Trump made more gains in Clark than he did in Washoe because of that white snob voter. Let's just be real. I don't know what else to call them. The wannabe elites. All right. That's a really good question. I think the bottom line here is, Ashwin, that everywhere we saw Republicans running strong, Johnson in Wisconsin did get closer in the end, obviously. Laxalt and Lombardo, very close races. I hear you, Laura. It's cool. Trump was running ahead of everybody, even when we had Walker up by 1, and we didn't pull the runoff for people distorting my polling record in Georgia. We didn't pull the runoff. We pulled the runoff in 2021, which we nailed perfectly. We only pulled the initial round. It was Walker plus 1 until Fulton dropped a bunch of ballots 3 days later, and then 2 days later, and it became Warnock plus 1. But again, very, very close. In all these states, Trump was running way ahead. So Walker and Warnock statistically even, but Trump up by 11 in Georgia. And we were not alone. Others were the same. Lombardo up by 1.2, I think we had him. Yet Trump up by 9. It was ridiculous. Oz, we had him inch ahead at the end there, but even when we had him down by 4, Trump up by 7, and Trump's lead barely it tightened a little, but it didn't change all that much in that last one, in the last one we conducted. Arizona, You know, Masters and Kelly duking it out, Lake slightly ahead. So whatever you want to take from the results of that, maybe we overstated them a little bit, but still Trump just way ahead. And it was like Trump +7. So even if you adjust for us being slightly wrong, it still would be Trump +3 or 4 in Arizona. So bottom line is, with these changes, Pennsylvania's a mess, though. It is. Michigan, mess, especially with the new law. It would be very difficult. So that brings us to let me just wrap up that one. I just think Trump was running so much further ahead that when you compare how Republicans perform versus how Trump was doing. By the way, we nailed North Carolina. Ted Budd plus what? A little over 4. He won by 3.5. We had Trump up by 11 in North Carolina. So the bottom line is he still was going to run ahead of these people who wound up winning. All right. Is he ready to ballot harvest? He's a turnout machine. He is a ground game. He doesn't have the infrastructure yet. Nobody does. I think Kelly proved that, even though Republicans in Wisconsin and the RNC, come on, she can say what she wants to say. Were they not just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago touting how they got their ground game in place for early voting, right? And in fact, you could see Kelly doing, we talked about this last night during live coverage, in some of the areas that came in early, Waukesha, there were many places. It looked like Dan Kelly was running better with early vote. Then he just ran out of steam. And Janet Protazalansky, sorry, I'm butchering her name. She just kept going because her turnout still continuously kept manifesting, whereas Kelly's did not. Republican turnout did not. So I think that he needs infrastructure for sure. But I think that Trump, look at the power he had just in his spoken word when he was against vote by mail. The turnout was massive. If he tells people to vote by mail, they'll vote by mail. Most of them. Or they'll vote early in person. All right, we're going to be unveiling something pretty soon, actually, on that, hopefully. And we'll discuss it. You know, I mean, and Sydney, I saw, and thank you for your super chat before, but this is a great example. Didn't a Trump-like image hurt Kerry Lake in Georgia and Arizona? You know, not really. Purdue in Georgia, Purdue underperformed Trump in the Atlanta metro area the first time around. He just wasn't a great candidate the second time. And then they're not out of reach, but the major problem is not this like Trump image in those areas, in those states. This has been a problem ongoing for a while now. And let me see if I can pull up. Tell me I got this graphic still around here. I can show you. It's been an issue for Republicans in these states because in these states you had, and here's a perfect example. I won't repeat myself. I'll just read what I wrote, which I was responding to somebody who was making a similar, because that's the media narrative, right? But in truth, it's not that simple. All right. So this is the top of the ticket election result by census tract category. GOP candidate margin of victory or defeat: Arizona 08 to 2022. Landon, excuse me. Got to give Landon some credit on this. He put this together on Data Wrapper. We were discussing this. Landon is up from a polling firm in Arizona. And the same thing I went back and looked at in Georgia, and I found the same thing. It's simplified. The media narrative around Arizona and Georgia is just simply too simplified. In reality, these trends were underway long before Donald Trump. Economics is politics. The urbanization of those two states over decades of foolish corporate-driven GOP gubernatorial policy fostered the creation of large urbanized areas with economies that needed the support of larger professional classes, educated whites largely. Once the urban vote share hit roughly 60% in both states, as was the case in Virginia as well, by the way, they became difficult for Republicans to win at the federal level. In fact, in Arizona and Georgia, Trump slightly reversed the trend in the GOP declining share of both the suburban and urban vote in 2020. So if you're looking at what I'm showing you right here, you can see that, you know, in 08, it was pathetic. I mean, McCain got crushed, but you expect, well, it was just a wave election. In 10, it went back up. But folks, turnout in 2010 was like 30%. It was pathetic. And then in 12, you could see it go back down when Obama's running for re-election. In fact, it went further under Mitt Romney in urban centers. He ticked back up in suburbia, but it went further declined in urban areas. And then when Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan were running. And then and by the way, the suburban tick up in the share of the vote was not impressive at all, ladies and gentlemen. But then in 14, it only bounces up again because of low turnout, 33% instead of 30%. Then you have these people come out in 2016, and Trump is able to keep it from falling dramatically in these areas, although they both do fall, but squeezes out, not only the share of the rural vote, but how much the rural vote made up of the overall electorate. In 18, Republicans again continued their slide. They blame Trump for that, of course. Without Trump, they would have lost the Senate. Trump himself is back on the ballot in 20. Look what happens. Not only does he increase rural, he increases suburban and urban. And then without Trump in 2022, it falls again. So the media narrative, I hope that helps. I always love visualizations because they really, they show you what people can't, really they can't show you. Yeah, in Life of Brian, I like your thinking here. We've been thinking about this a lot. Institutional electoral suppression of candidates with abhorrent views is important for democracy, dangerous to democracy. And the reason why we've been thinking about this for the Public Polling Project is that we have been doing research on this when it comes to our juror research, that basically allows them to. Yeah, and Chris, I'm going to get to your question in a second because I think a lot of people are having a meltdown a little bit too early. But basically, in a nutshell, I want to just make the case that this is more complicated than it looks. And then as far as Life of Brian, we've been doing them and finding some interesting results in our voir dire research that has to do with that. Like, what do you think is more important? Suppressing these, having parties and institutions or whatever suppress candidates, or should we let them hash it out in a democratic system? And I would like to try to bring that nationally to see. It's a really good suggestion. And then Chris Melendez says, can you talk about Wisconsin Senate seat that was won last night, giving Republicans a supermajority, and that would affect voter laws? This is another thing. I mean, what doomers are saying is that, well, it's just going to go to the state Supreme Court, and they're going to knock it down. We've seen this in North Carolina, and the Republican legislature just keeps throwing them at the court. Over years and years, this happened, and it became a battle between the legislature and the court. Obviously, the court always thought it had its last say, but then the legislature would just keep bringing it back up. All right. Now, ultimately, what happened? Republicans took control. Right. And by the way, it is a big deal. I meant to bring this up. Somebody had asked a question the other day about this. A Charlotte area Democrat has, because of this, not just state politics, but everything that's going on with the persecutions, has switched her party. She is now a Republican. She is a big deal. And now that gave Republicans their last seat they needed to have a supermajority in both state houses, the House and the Senate. So they have a veto-proof majority now, so they can override Cooper, and they have now that Allen won, they have the Supreme Court. So sometimes, Chris, you just got to keep hammering it out with that court and fighting them tooth and nail. Maybe you even get a defection, although the Republican is always more likely to defect. But I'm not a doomer here when it comes to this. Wisconsin elections are close when it's competitive. There was all of the makings for that to have been a competitive election. It absolutely will be competitive with Trump on the ballot. Trump will win Wisconsin before he'll win Michigan and Pennsylvania. He just, again, I mean, guys, this is not, yeah, exactly. Dan, listen, this has got to be brought up. Dan Kelly has the GOP endorsement, not Trump's. Win SCOTUS. Also GOP. Dan Kelly lost Wisconsin SCOTUS because Trump didn't endorse him. DeSantis bots coping after hitching wagons to candidates whose campaigns are dead before starting. He's absolutely right. This campaign, and we had Liz on before to talk about it, I alluded to it. I didn't mean to put her on the spot, but she knows what I said is true. They didn't want Trump's involvement. They didn't want his help. They were convinced Trump would hurt them. Unbelievable. And again, I mean, real quick before we go, guys, we're Reagan to the left, Herbert Walker Bush to the right. Trump to the left, Mitt Romney to the right. The overlap is over, even though it had been 40 years, 30-something years. The overlap is astonishing, almost 4 decades later. 1984, 2016. And by the way, again, just to grab it, just to show you, where is Johnson? Here's Johnson. It's just identical to Trump's map. It's identical. There's only one county change in the 2020, and that is Door County right here on the peninsula. And I'm talking about, look, Ron Johnson won it by 75. Donald Trump lost it by like 45 or 65 or something. It was very small. Very, very small. It was the only difference. The rest of the map is exactly the same. Dan Kelly barely won Waukesha last night. Barely won it. I mean, it was abysmal, folks. And that is turnout. Ron Johnson won it 62.3 to 37.3. Trump won it big. 60 to 39. Dan Kelly won it 58 to 42. I mean, Trump squeezed several more points out of it. But again, the big differences here. Which one am I showing you right now? Which one's up? Oh, that's Johnson. Okay, so all of this area that Johnson won, Vernon, Richland, Sauk, Dodge, Columbia, he just did so much more poorly here and all through here, right? Where you can see is red or close. Same thing with Reagan, by the way. Either red or very close. Reagan was red, but of course he lost Dane. He carried them all. And then look, the Trump, that's much, much more like what Ron Johnson's map looks like. Only Johnson lost Sauk. Trump did not. All right. He did lose Sauk by 500 votes. He lost it in 2020. Good bellwether. So is Juneau, though, by the way. But again, that's another great example. Juneau County, Trump, 64%. That was two-time Obama vote. Dan Kelly only got 57. All right. Ron Johnson, 64. 64.7. So there was just turnout that just was not juice there. All right. This is, again, an image problem that they have. Ron Johnson, he benefited from being a Trump senator from 16. He did. Those people who went to the polls to vote for Donald Trump after voting for Obama twice voted for Ron Johnson. And that's forever going to be ingrained in their voting history, in their voting psyche. Ron Johnson has maintained that image over 6 years. And that's why in 2022 he was able to hold on. Even though Democrats juiced the hell out of turnout in both Dane and Milwaukee, as well as other areas. Johnson got the turnout he needed, and he also was able to hold on to that Trump coalition. And that's why he won. All right? And that's why Dan Kelly did not. Like Liz Harrington said, God, Liz, I'm sorry. Like Liz Harrington said, okay, you didn't want Trump's endorsement. How'd that work out for you? It's a shame. Shame for Mr. Kelly. I'm sure he's a good guy. But you make these decisions, got to live with them. In case Rebecca Clayfish didn't. It didn't dawn on you watching a very popular lieutenant governor get her ass kicked. It's just, and by the way, I'm making an observation here. If you think that DeSantis is going to carry Wisconsin after what you saw last night, you got another thing coming. He's not going to reach those voters. Those voters are not now. I'm not saying he never could. I think he's making the mistakes that other candidates made, that Rebecca Clayfish made. He's making the same mistakes that Dan Kelly made. He's making the same mistakes that all these other Republicans made, that Ron Johnson did not make, by the way. All right. It's an image before messaging. Right. All right. So with that in mind, don't forget Friday, we have a packed show. All right. It's going to be actually a pretty big announcement on Friday from somebody you are going to want to watch. Do not want to miss this. When we're talking about this right now, what we're talking about, let me just say, because I don't want to blow it, but this announcement is part of this whole entire Republicans need to fix their image issue. All right. This will not change until the party changes, and who's in the party changes. It's not going to happen. So with that in mind, don't miss Friday. We'll have more update on some legal commentary, more between the connection of the Obama White House and Alvin Bragg's district attorney's office and the Manhattan DA's office. A lot more, so much more, folks. And then, like I said, we had Wisconsin, so wasn't able to put, to fast track the polling, but we'll have some new polling by Friday as well, it looks like. So don't miss it. You won't want to miss it. Noon Eastern Standard Time. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching. Laura would love to say it if she was here, but she's not. Deuces. See you Friday. All the best.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Special thanks to Daniel Street for coming on and giving us an hour today. Don't forget to check out DanielRStreet.com. Later, folks.